All right, I'm going to go ahead and get you some examples of word problems where you would use these equations. Okay, so in a word problem, in this problem, it says Bob wants to frame a picture. He needs to know how long to cut the length and width of the wood of the frame. The width of the picture is x, the length of the picture is x plus 6. If the perimeter, very important word there, perimeter of the picture is 108 inches, what are the length and width of the picture? So it tells us that the perimeter is 108. Now, one thing you've got to realize here is what perimeter is. Okay, perimeter is the distance around a shape or around the outside of a shape. Okay, the distance around the outside of a shape. That means this side plus this side plus this side plus this side is going to be 108 inches. Okay, another thing you've got to know, you're expected to know, is that a rectangle, if this side is x, this side is x. These two sides are the same length, as well as these two sides being the same length. So this would be x plus 6 also. So using our knowledge that we've learned the past few weeks, we're going to write an equation here. We know 108 is equal to, well, the length times the width, length plus the width plus the length plus the width. Okay, that's the formula for perimeter. But in this case, we know that our length is x plus 6. Our width is x. Our length is x plus 6. Our width is x. Now, this is where we can come in and combine our like terms. Okay, when you have just the parentheses here and there's no number smashed up to it, you don't really need those parentheses. You can rewrite it, kind of like I had it to start with there. And then all you do is you combine your like terms. Combine your constants and your variables. You get 108 equals 1, 2, 3, 4x plus 12. And then we just simply solve. So you would subtract 12, you get 96 equals 4x. And when we divide 96 by 4, you get 24 equals x. Now, that does not tell us what the length and width is. That simply tells us what x is. The question wants to know what are the length and width of the picture. Oh, you can't see that. What are the length and width of the picture? So the width here is just x. We know x is equal to 24. The length right here we kind of have to play around with. We know x is equal to 24. So the width, or the length, is equal to 24 plus 6, which would be 30. If you wanted to check yourself, you could add your new perimeter up and see if it equaled 108 or not. 30 plus 30 is 60, 24 plus 24 is 48, 60 and 48 is indeed 108, so we got that answer correct. Okay, let's look at another one here. Each of Miss Smith's students uses a certain number of pencils per week of school. There are 22 students in Miss Smith's class. If there are 36 weeks of school and Miss Smith's students use 3,168 pencils in a year, how many pencils does each student use per week to write and solve an equation for this situation? There are 36 weeks. We want to know how many each kid uses per week. They use that many in a whole school year. and she has 22 students. Okay, so you've got to take the information that you know and you've got to think a little bit. It takes a little bit of critical thinking to figure out how to solve this question. So our final answer is going to be the number of pencils a student uses per week. Okay, we know she has 22 students that used 3,168 pencils over a 36-week period. And we want to know how many they used per week. A single student, one student per week. So one way that we can do this, if you were just figuring out, you could start off by dividing and figuring out how many pencils a student used, and then divide that by 36 and figure out how many pencils that student used per week. Now, in order to write and solve an equation for this, we've got to think a little bit. Okay, you're going to start with some variable. Okay, start with P, call that for pencils. Okay, pencils per week right here. We'll call this P that we're looking for. Your variables can be anything. You could have called it X, you could have called it whatever. Is going to be 3,168 pencils divided by 22 students. Notice we put in parentheses because we need to do that first. And then you can put a slash out here on the side, or it's more proper to do it as a fraction. Divide that by 36 weeks, and that gives us how many pencils a student uses per week. When you solve this equation, you end up finding out that P equal to 4. That's how many pencils each student uses per week. It's a lot of pencils. Okay, next, Jim has $50 to spend at the fair. If it costs $5 for admission and $2.50 per ride, how many rides can Jim ride at the fair? Write and solve an equation. Okay, so finding that total, just like in the last one, finding that total is important. Okay, so we know he's going to end up spending $50. Admission is $5, and then $2.50 per ride. So this word per right here, okay, each, every, and per are always going to give us our variable. So each, every, and per, if those give us our variable, then to write this equation, 250 is what's going to be with our variable. So if we know he ends up spending $50, he spends $5 to get in. That $5 only gets spent one time. Okay, at the Jamboree, you don't have to pay to get in. So all you pay for is either your bracelet, you might could call that a one-time fee, but when you go to the Jamboree, it's a certain amount of money per ride, and the more rides you ride, the more money you spend. Well, here it's $5 to get in the gate, and then $2.50 per ride. So you spend that $5 one time, and then you've got to add to that $2.50 per ride. So that right there would be our equation. And then to solve it, you subtract 5. Both sides, you get 45 equals 250 x. And you find out that x, when we divide by 250 here, you get 18 rides that he would be able to ride. It's a lot of rides. Can't imagine that. I don't even think there's that many rides at the Jamboree. Okay, now let's look at one last example here, and then I'll let you go. Jill is baking cookies for a bake sale. She needs a total of 126 cookies for the bake sale. She has already baked 4 dozen cookies. How many more cookies does she need to bake to meet her goal? Okay, so she needs a total of 126 cookies. She has already baked 4 dozen cookies. How many more cookies does she need to make her goal? Now, a dozen. How many cookies is a dozen? Okay, a dozen is 12 cookies. So she's already made 4 dozen cookies. Then we know she's got 126 is her total. And she's made 4 dozen. In order to find out how many she has left, okay, you've got to subtract your 4 dozen from your 126. So I'm going to write this different. You could write it that way, but there is an easier way. Okay. 126 is how many you want in the end. How many she has left is going to be your variable here that you're searching for. So we're going to take our 126, our total that we're trying to find, and we're going to subtract 4 dozen. 4 times D, 4 dozen. In this case, we know, and for all cases, a dozen is 12. So when we do 126 minus 48, you're going to find out that she has a whopping 78 cookies left to cook. Okay, and if you wanted to know how many more dozen cookies that would be, you simply take your 78 and you divide it by 12. You find out she has 6.5 dozen left to cook. Question does not ask that, but just an added piece of information there for you. Okay, these questions, these word problems do take a lot of time to understand how to do them. Okay, there are multiple ways to do them. You saw me do 2 of them right there. Okay, I started one and then I bailed on it and did it a different way. Okay, that's fine. There's not necessarily a right way as long as you come up with the right answer. You can set up equations lots of different ways. You just have to really think through the question and see what the question is asking you to find. Again, it'll take a lot of time. It'll take a lot of work on your part to really get good at these, but we're going to spend the next few weeks on it so you do have the time to do that. If you have any questions, I would love to help you, and good luck on your worksheet today.